On a rainy autumn evening in Edinburgh, Emma Clark ran through the cobbled streets, clutching her coat tightly against the wind. Her umbrella had betrayed her 5 minutes earlier, and now her only mission was to reach the small bookshop at the corner of Candlemaker Row before the storm worsened. The doorbell chimed softly as she entered, the warmth and smell of paper wrapping around her like an old friend. She wasn't looking for love. Emma had long since buried that notion under the weight of a demanding career in architecture and the remnants of a heartbreak she rarely acknowledged. But fate had its own blueprints. As she browsed the shelves, her fingers brushed against someone else's. A man reached for the same edition of T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets. Their eyes met. He smiled, an easy, genuine expression that made her chest flutter. "Seems we have similar taste," he said. "Or good timing," she replied. His name was Daniel Wren, a literature professor from Oxford, visiting Edinburgh for a conference. They ended up chatting for hours over coffee in the shop's cozy corner, losing track of time entirely. When they finally parted ways that night, the city's rain had stopped, but something else had begun. Emma and Daniel's relationship unfolded slowly, beautifully, like a classic novel. With Daniel back in Oxford, they began exchanging letters, handwritten, mailed letters, alongside late-night calls. It was deliberate and romantic, a love built not on convenience, but on intention. Their letters were full of longing and laughter. Emma described her architectural sketches. Daniel recited snippets of poetry. They sent each other pressed leaves and shared dreams they hadn't voiced aloud before. Every second weekend they'd meet, alternating between Oxford and Edinburgh. Each visit was filled with exploration and comfort, from stolen kisses in the Bodleian Library shadow to picnics by Arthur's Seat. Friends began to notice the light in Emma's eyes and the softness in Daniel's voice. Despite the miles, they felt closer than ever. Distance, however romantic, is still distance. After a year, cracks began to form. Emma was offered a promotion that required more travel. Daniel's father fell ill, anchoring him further to Oxford. Their meetings grew infrequent. Letters turned into emails. Calls became shorter. Emma tried to bridge the gap, proposing a move. But Daniel, devoted to his family and his tenure track, hesitated. "I don't want you to give up your dreams for me," he said. "What if my dream includes you?" she whispered. They argued for the first time. Neither raised their voice, but the silence that followed was louder than any scream. They didn't break up, but something broke. Emma poured herself into work, leading a major project in Barcelona. She told herself she was thriving, but each night in her hotel felt emptier than the last. Daniel, meanwhile, watched his father fade and his responsibilities grow. They still spoke, still wrote, but love needs more than words. It needs presence. One day, Emma received a letter, not an email, a real letter, scented with Daniel's familiar cologne. "I miss us," it began. He spoke of the little things, the way she tapped her pen when thinking, the way her hair smelled after rain. He wrote of regret, of hope, of love that refused to die. Emma cried reading it, her tears smudging the ink. She booked the next flight to Oxford. Oxford was gray and wet when she arrived. It reminded her of that first meeting in Edinburgh. Daniel met her at the train station. No words, just a long, silent embrace that melted months of pain. They walked and talked, slowly unspooling the tangles of the past year. They didn't promise forever, but they promised today. And sometimes, today is enough to start again. They spent the weekend in a small village outside Oxford, cooking together, laughing, talking deep into the night. For the first time in months, they felt like themselves again. When Emma left, they weren't afraid anymore. They had found something worth fighting for. Emma eventually relocated to a firm in London, a compromise between her ambition and their relationship. Daniel visited often, and she spent weekends in Oxford. The distance shortened not because the miles changed, but because their efforts did. They traveled together. Italy, Japan, Morocco. Every trip added new layers to their connection. They visited ancient ruins, took cooking classes, and danced barefoot on hotel balconies. Daniel published a book of essays inspired by their letters. He dedicated it to her. 2 years later, on a quiet hill in the Lake District, Daniel proposed with a poem he wrote just for her. You are the space between the stars, the silence between each note, the reason I kept writing when the words stopped. She said yes. Marriage didn't change everything. It deepened what they had. They bought a small stone cottage near the Cotswolds. Emma started her own design studio. Daniel began teaching creative writing workshops from home. Life was busy, but they made time for Friday night dinners, lazy Sundays, and handwritten notes tucked into lunchboxes. When their daughter Lily was born, their world shifted again. Sleepless nights, endless diapers, tiny socks. But also joy, giggles, a deeper kind of love. Emma sang lullabies about architecture. Daniel wrote bedtime stories starring stars and staircases. They didn't lose themselves, they evolved together. Not all days were perfect. There were health scares, financial stress, creative blocks. There were times when the house felt too small or the silence too loud. But they had built something strong. On their 10th anniversary, they returned to Edinburgh. The same bookshop still stood. Inside, they found the same copy of 4 quartets. They bought it this time, wrote their names in it, gave it to Lily. Epilogue: A Home Between Pages. Emma and Daniel never stopped writing each other letters. Even after the years passed, even after their hair grayed and their daughter went off to university, they still wrote. Slipped notes into pockets, into suitcases, into the margins of books. Because love, they had learned, isn't about grand gestures. It's about choosing each other day after day. And in the end, the distance between stars was never really distance at all. It was just the space where love had room to grow.